Welcome back, everybody. It's been a long time no see situation with the Dota 2 Fundamentals course, but I intend to get it back on track starting with this video. And this video is going to be all about breaking down the overall formula of a Dota 2 game in terms of order of objectives and how to view the map, such that you guys have a little bit better understanding of exactly what to be looking out for at each stage in the game.
Banana slam jam.
So I think the first concept that's really important for everyone to understand is that in general, the Dota 2 map is cut in half. Like both teams are going to control about half of the map. If one team's winning by a lot, maybe their half will be larger, but the idea is simple. If each team controls half the map, we have to then understand where that line is drawn at each stage in the game. So when it comes to controlling areas of the map, it really comes down to where teams and heroes want to play on the map, combined with which towers are alive. Because the towers at the end of the day give you information, they give you control of areas, and overall kind of dictate how safe you are because your teammates can TP to help you there, and all that jazz. So at the start of the game, quite simply, when all the towers are still alive, the map is cut in half right along the river. Right along the river. And when I say looking at this half of the map, what that's basically telling you is the closer you are to the enemy lines, or maybe you've passed the enemy lines, the more dangerous it is on the map. So like if you're a mid laner and you play across the river, you're in more danger. If you're an off laner playing across the river, which is the default of the lane, you're in more danger. If you're a safe laner that's further away from the river, more so underneath your tower, you're safer. And as the lane pushes out, you're in more danger because you're approaching the halfway point of the map. And this pretty much reigns true for the entirety of the laning phase. And that's predominantly because the fact that none of the towers are dying in the first 5 to 6 minutes of the game, most games. So once the laning stage is over, we have to start considering that towers are going to begin to fall. So what's important to understand is the towers that are important to the game and why they are important, and also how they change this halfway line. When it comes to playing into the mid game, past the laning phase, most teams are still looking to ramp up their farm. So what it means to get farm is both teams are going to most likely be farming 3 lanes immediately after the laning phase, or at least 2 out of 3 lanes. So that is equal. So where do we break the tie? Which team is farming more than the other? It almost always comes down to which team has access to more jungle camps. So I'd like to point out that, spoiler alert, the most important towers in the game are Dire's safe lane tower and Radiant's safe lane tower. And the reason why these towers are so important to be the first tower that you take is when you think about the half of the map getting divided right now across the river, we want that half of ours to extend into more jungle camps. So if we take this tower, which is definitely an important tower, it really only enables us to be safe here as Dire. You know, if we're Dire and we take this tower, this tower is pretty much protecting that camp, and that's it. If we look at this tower as Dire, if we take it, there's no camps that become accessible to us because of this tower being dead. This is still a little bit scary to invade. Same with this. But as 2 towers that are previously on their side of the map here, 2 camps, excuse me, this camp and this camp, if we take this tower, there's now only one direction for Radiant to gank us from, which is over here. So taking this safe lane tower as Dire pretty much guarantees opening up these 2 camps for our team, and sometimes this camp. And same with vice versa on Radiant. If we take this tower, suddenly this camp and this camp has no flank paths for the Dire team to gank us, and also sometimes this camp. So the reason why the safe lane towers are so important is because they enable farming more camps for one team. So let's say one team gets that tower first. I have to remind you that now we're talking about the area of the map that your towers control. So if we're Dire and we take this tower, the opponent no longer has control over this area anymore because their tower over here is dead, and it's the only thing really protecting this area. So suddenly the line of control for Dire kind of starts about right here, and we have to draw it straight this way, right? We go this way, and then back to the river and across, right? So if Dire takes bottom tower first, their half, or their control of the game is all of the river, plus like this little sliver that they added, which effectively gives them like 60% of the map and an extra 3 jungle camps. It's really important to understand that both teams have 9 jungle camps on their side of the map, 6 in the primary jungle and 3 in the ancient jungle. So if we take over 2, maybe 3 camps from the opponent team, suddenly it's 11-7, 12-6. That's a pretty significant portion of the map that we're controlling in comparison to the other team. So by opening up these camps, say the other team took this tower and didn't open up any camps, so say this tower is dead and this tower is dead, then suddenly we have these 3 camps and we still feel pretty comfortable in here. So effectively, if each team traded 1 tower for 1 tower, the Dire would still have more camps that they feel access to. So as the game goes on, the first towers to go down are almost always this tower and this tower. And because those towers die, the map in half, rather than being the river, is now going to be starting about right here. And just remember that as you get closer to this line, you're in more danger. And if you cross it, you're potentially in a lot of danger. So what that means is that it's important to understand, because of this line, that as a Dire player, you're most often safer right here than you are right here once this tower is dead. So even though this is quote unquote the Dire half of the map, once this tower is dead, this is considered more dangerous than this. And this, since it's right on the border, is about the same safety level as being like right here, because that's about where the line is. So what that means is, like, if you're deep in your own territory, you're most likely safe unless the opponent smokes. But example being, the safest farm on the map is all the way back here, since the line is drawn in half, right? The safest farm is back here. But the second safest farm is usually right here, because if we think about the line being drawn in half, this is further away from the line than the likes of these camps, even though these camps are still technically in your control. So having a general understanding of like where is safe on the map according to your own power level is a really important thing in Dota, something you'll learn to kind of judge over time. You'll learn to think, am I strong? How strong am I? And having a basic understanding of this is how dangerous each part of the map is really important for knowing really where to play with your hero. So, because these 2 towers are the most likely to go down first, I would actually give a full disclaimer here, guys. Dota has a lot of formulas, a lot of things that behave as the norm, but there are always exceptions. So I want you to keep in mind that unless something specifically happens in the game, say the enemy safe lane wins by 4 levels so that they, like, Dire safe lane wins by a ton of levels, so they take this tower super early. Or mid lane has a hero like Death Prophet who takes the tower super early. There are exceptions to this map play rule, but generally speaking, unless you see them, this is how it's going to go. Because it becomes the most efficient to take this tower and this tower, what inevitably happens is Radiant ends up playing top and mid most games, around like the mid game, and Dire plays bottom and mid. So because this line is kind of the control of the game right here, where Dire's kind of like playing on this side of the line and Radiant's playing on this side of the line, the tension kind of comes in the mid lane most of the time, right? Because that's where the line is like most polarizing. There's a mid tower that's still alive that's right on this line, but then there's also runes. So really the way that you have to think about the map in the mid game is that you're constantly pushing bottom and mid as Dire, you're constantly pushing top and mid as Radiant, and most clashes are going to happen either here, at this tier 2, at this tier 1 mid, or at this tier 2 bottom. But the biggest emphasis is that it's almost always somewhere on this line where these clashes are happening. And the only real exceptions is being massive stomps, or like I said, specific hero situations. So knowing, generally speaking, to be fight ready somewhere on this line, ready to protect your border of the map, is super crucial when you think about how to play. So because I'm playing top and mid as Radiant and bottom and mid as Dire, the next towers that are most likely to fall are the tier 2 bottom and the tier 1 mid. I want you to think of the enemy safe lane as a way to access the mid lane. These the waves themselves serve as a protector, something that provides you vision. If we have creeps all the way over here of our own on the Dire side, they're basically wards for us. They're telling us, hey, there's no heroes in this area of the map. I want you to think of them as escorting you into the dangerous part of the map. They're like your tour guide, your jungle guide, saying like, hey, it's safe to proceed as long as we're in front of you. So by pushing the bottom lane as Dire and the top lane as Radiant, you're enabling yourself to actually invade this jungle. And by invading this jungle, you're also giving yourself access to the mid tower. So most team moves, like team fights and 5-on-5s, or just like big group up, revolve around this mid tower because it's the people that are pushing the side lanes connecting to their team. Usually the tier 2 towers are towers of convenience. And what I mean by tower of convenience is you're already farming this area, you're simply pushing the lane into the tower, and it eventually dies over time. Very rarely is it efficient for you to group up as 5 and take this tower. So what I think of as a carry is I'm looking to push this lane and connect to my team mid. If I'm looking as a mid, I'm looking to push this lane and be ready for my team to connect to me. Every role in the game has a general job to do in this equation. Supports often supply the wards, so as Dire, you're probably warding somewhere over here to help you secure that area. As Radiant, you're warding somewhere over here. Maybe you're defending your side of the map because you're more worried about getting invaded. But most wards are going to be somewhere placed near the border of control, right? Because that's where we need to make sure we see if the opponent's invading us. So if you're Dire, you would place wards over here if you're being more defensive, and you're placing wards over here if you're being more aggressive, right? Because that's like the aggressive side of the border. So generally speaking, the 2 towers that go down next are the mid tier 1 and the safe lane tier 2. Now, I wouldn't say there's a specific order these 2 towers, but these are the towers you're kind of looking to take. And once they go down for both teams, which is most commonly the case, is suddenly we have to envision the map with this tower gone, and this tower gone for both teams. And when we're talking about areas that you control, we now have to draw a line between the new remaining towers in the game, which is this tower protecting top, this tower protecting mid for Dire, and then this tower protecting mid for Radiant, and this tower protecting top for Dire, or for Radiant, excuse me. So what ends up happening is that the towers alive are this one, and this one, this one, this one, and this one. So the line becomes more like this, where you go from this tower to this tower, and then down this way, towards this. So what you'll notice when these 3 towers are dead for each team is the border of safety for each side is approximately the mid lane, because Dire controls most of this area now, because all the towers are gone for Radiant, and Radiant controls most of this area, because most of the towers are gone for Dire. So the most dangerous area on the map past 15 to 20 minutes once these 3 towers are dead is actually the mid lane. While usually the top lane is the safest for Radiant and the bottom lane is safest for Dire. So what it takes in order to take this tower is 75% control of the most dangerous area on the map. I just need you to comprehend that that is difficult to do. It is a lot of strength required to take this tier 2 tower. Same thing for this tier 2 tower. The most dangerous area on the map is mid lane, and we have to control 75% of this mid lane in order to take this tower, right? And the same thing applies to thinking about these 2 towers. Is these 2 towers are technically deep in the enemy territory still. So the only way you're getting these towers is by being overwhelmingly strong in comparison to the opponent at about 20 to 30 minutes in. And also, if you smoke to invade their area. If you're thinking about doing anything that isn't in the area of control of your team, such as we're talking about right now, this halfway point, that's where smokes really come into play. I'll definitely be doing a video on the intricacies of smoke ganks later on. But that's a good way of envisioning it, where it's, if we want to invade enemy territory, understanding generally where enemy territory is, that's when we can start applying smokes. But because this is such a massive hump in the game, where basically what you're doing is flipping the map, where you're saying as Radiant, we've been controlling top for this entire time, and we want to take these 2 towers now, right? And as Dire, you're controlling this area, and suddenly we want to be controlling this area. We want to be controlling the complete opposite side of the map. So if that's the case, then we usually need Aegis. Really simply put, we need Roche. So what Dire will look to often do is some sort of smoke gank that gets them off the bottom side of the map to control this triangle, such that they can then take Roche. What Radiant will do is they will exert the strength that they already have on the current map side they're playing, take over this area with some wards, and secure Roche. Now, it is super important that I reemphasize that almost every game, you will take Roche prior to taking this mid tier 2 tower, as well as this tier 1 tower for Radiant, and this tier 1 tower for Dire, meaning the Radiant takes that tower and the Dire takes this tower. That is super important to understand, that after many years of professional Dota and players playing the map, that this has been the overwhelming consensus that this is most often the order of objectives that you take. So if you guys want to party queue with some of your lower MMR friends or just get kind of the basics down of this, being on the same page about this is super important. And even if your teammates are screaming at you, yelling at you to go push that tier 2 tower, BSJ is telling you you're most certainly supposed to get Roche before that in almost every game. So the Roche lets you then flip the map. So if you're the team that's winning, you'll want to go take more towers, right? So if you have the Aegis as Dire, you're going to start playing this part of the map, playing 2 lanes. We talked about the dead lane concept throughout the entire history of my channel. The whole dead lane concept TLDR'd for basics of fundamentals of Dota 2. Once the game gets further on, it becomes more and more dangerous to be alone. If the enemy sees that you're split up too much, they can kill you. So the dead lane concept revolves around the idea that you cannot play 3 lanes past maybe 15 minutes into the game. If I show one hero on each of the 3 lanes, it's very easy for the enemy team to just pick one and kill them because you're also providing information that you're separated. So when the dead lane concept comes into play is the fact that you can control 2 lanes. So we talked about bottom and mid for Dire, top and mid for Radiant. Once one of the 2 teams gets Aegis, that's when it's time to look for them to smoke to control the other side of the map. And by controlling the other side of the map, I want you to think that you're not only doing this to control 2 lanes, but you're doing it to get the other team stuck in their base. So most often, after the first Aegis, the map will flip. So Radiant will look to invade here, or Dire will look to invade here. Now, there's 2 approaches for the team that's getting invaded. If they feel strong enough to defend, you can set up defensively trying to make sure the opponent doesn't get in here. Or if you don't feel strong enough to defend, you don't think you can teamfight them, suddenly you're just going to let them flip the map. Okay? So you have 2 choices. Let the enemy take over your area and kind of trade for theirs, or defend your area at all costs. And that really comes down to what strength of a lineup you think you have. But knowing that these are your 2 best options, the only real options that you have that you need to be prepared for is really important. And now if you're in low MMR games and people are just not invading, they're not trying to take your area, that's great. Keep playing the map as normal when you're losing. If you're on the winning team, try to get your team to do this. Now, the idea is that it's not about knowing exactly when these things are going to happen, but if the game is going to progress, if things are going to happen that are relevant in the game, these are the events that will take place. So once again, if Dire invades triangle, Radiant either defends or simply the map switches so that Dire has this half and Radiant has this half. So whenever you're the team that's ahead, you have 2 choices when you're ahead. One is to continuously flip the map in a way that you're running at them and making it so you're slowly hurting them in the base. This is really good against lineups with limited mobility. If you're dealing with carries like Medusa, Luna, stuff like this, it's usually very good to force them to go back to their base because they can't really escape from you ganking them. But if the enemy lineup has a lot of split pushers, mobile heroes like Puck and Anti-Mage and Storm, it's most often best to simply force them to come back to their base by pushing high ground and threatening their base. Because oftentimes these mobile heroes that are really hard to catch are also not the greatest at defending their base. While vice versa, if you take heroes like Medusa and Sniper, these heroes that are bad at split pushing, they're also very good at defending their base. When it comes to closing out the game, when you're looking to go high ground, it's all about thinking, is it our job to put them in their base and let them sit there, and in which case we just farm the entire map over and over again? Or is it our job to force them back to base as heroes like Anti-Mage and then actually force them to fight us? Those are really the 2 overall approaches to ending the game. The first Aegis is usually about forcing them back to their base. So once you force the split pushers back to base, you can often just back off and farm. Because as long as the opponent is not in control of the map to farm it, you will be out farming them. So usually the recipe for the game is that the first Aegis establishes control of the map. Very rarely will you actually take high ground in racks with the first Aegis. Now there are exceptions such as like Huskar lineups and such, or if the enemy team gives up. But that's something you should not be expecting. You should not feel pressured to do if your teammates are yelling at you to do so, and you should not feel rushed. The overall goal of the first Aegis is to get them in their base. Usually, it's get them in their base. If they don't fight to get out, just keep farming. And then control the map until the second Aegis. And the second Aegis is where you usually look to go high ground. So I know this is not the perfect formula for you guys, but I want you to generally understand the idea of this half map play and the overall formula of objectives that you take from both sides. I hope this helps you understand the macro level of Dota at the most basic level, and I look forward to teaching you more about this in my future videos. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. ESJ out.